Hi, everybody. I'm Devorah Governale.
And I'm Carrie Parker, and welcome back for another episode. And today we are going to start talking about Christmas movies. And to begin, we're going to start with one of our favorites, A Muppet Christmas Carol. And to begin the conversation, I actually am going to ask Devorah, what are your top three Christmas movies,
Oh
favorites
my
of all
God.
time?
My top three Christmas films of all
And
time.
top three.
Oh my heavens, there's so many good ones. Um, I feel like I have to put Family Stone in there. I
Okay.
sit and watch that one by myself, and I'm just sobbing at the end. Um, another one that's kind of new for me is Happiest Season. It's another one where I cry quite a bit at the end. I just think that it's got such an incredible cast, and I feel like it's such an important story to be told. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that making sure that that message of, just loving our loved ones unconditionally is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I guess I will include today's film as well, Muppet Christmas Carol. It comes along with a lot of really important memories for me. So it's not just the film
Mm-hmm.
itself, but also the experiences that I've had in my life associated with that film. So yeah,
And
I'm sure that
I
after this, I'm going to remember like 12,000 more titles I
I
wish I'd seen.
know.
There you go.
But that's kind of the point is catching you off guard where you haven't had extra time to think about it. And so it's genuinely just the ones that you're like, no, I have to watch these every single Christmas because I feel like that's the reality. Versus the like, we can talk about best Christmas movies, but that's a whole different story from your favorite Christmas movies that it's like every single year, hands down, I have to watch this movie. So
Yeah.
mine are Scrooged. Not gonna lie, I love Scrooged. I love the modern like antithesis, the Bill Murray sass. I love Carole King. Anyway, so Kane. But so then Mixed Nuts, which is not everyone's most popular, but it's a farce and I love it. And it's Steve Martin, Adam Sandler, Liev Schreiber, um, Juliette Lewis, Anthony LaPaglia, and why can't I think of her name right now? But it's literally the most random thing. Parker Posey and Jon Stewart also randomly in it for like 2 seconds each, but absolutely perfect. Um, Super fun Christmas movie. And then my last one, which is like the irony of it's one of my favorite rom-coms, but it's Christmas, and so I will watch it for fun, and it's Christmas year round, while we were sleeping. I love, love, love that movie, right? Not that we were talking about a Pullman the other day at all or anything, but that's the reality of like when I say I had a crush on Bill Pullman as a kid, I had a crush on While We Were Sleeping Bill Pullman. I wasn't even ready for Spaceballs yet. You know what I mean? Like it was While We Were Sleeping, and I was just like, who wouldn't pick that brother over that? It was hilarious. But it's a Christmas movie and it's adorable. Um, Great story there. So that is our intro. Now we're going to talk about Muppet Christmas Carol, because as Devorah said, it's it's a favorite, but at the same time, we have memories attached to it. And I think generationally for both of us, the Muppet Christmas Carol just speaks because it's Muppets. But at the same time, Michael Caine went all out for that, right? He got the assignment of being Scrooge and he went, I don't care that the rest of the cast are Muppets. I'm doing this. And we got a classic out of it. So, Devorah's got the history down because that's what she's good at.
Well, like you, Carrie, I do love researching. I am a big research geek and nerd, and I love it so much. Okay, so Christmas Carol, we all know it. We know it because it was written a very long time ago by Charles Dickens, 1843. We also know it because it is possibly one of the most retold stories that we've got out there. It is one of the first short films that started to appear at the very, very, very early trailblazer stages of film. 1901 is the first recorded version of it. And honestly, for the first like half a century of filmmaking, it was being produced sometimes as often as every other year. The first probably like 2 decades, it was just in short film version because a lot of films were that short films. 1935 is when we got one of our very first full length ones. It actually took some of the actors from one of the short films that was produced in Britain, and they did the full length version of it. You have in 1970 the Albert Finney, at the time it was called A New Musical, Scrooge A New Musical. The 1988 version, like you're talking about with Bill Murray, classic comedy, of course. And then we started to get all of the youth animated ones. We had Mickey in 1983, Looney Tunes did one in 2006, All Dogs Go to Heaven did one in 1998, Barbie did one in 2008. And then we got the computer animated one with Jim Carrey in 2009. I'm going to admit to you, I've made the conscious life choice to never watch that one. But I know for some
Same.
people, yeah, I know for some people that one's a big classic for them. We started to get kind of the rom-com version that had the gender swap. Christina Milian did it in 2010, and it was called Christmas Cupid. Toni Braxton did it in 2018. It was called Every Day is Christmas. We of course got the film version of this, how the story came to be in 2017 with The Man Who Invented Christmas. And I think a newer version that has already become a classic for so many because it's got such an incredible cast, of course, is Spirited, of course, that came out in 2022.
Mhm.
So yes, you've got this story that has been around. We're just a couple decades shy, less than a couple decades shy of hitting 200 years since this story has been around. And clearly we are just obsessed with retelling it. It is, of course, also done live in many venues across the country, I'm sure across the world. Alan Menken did a version a couple decades ago. His is one of my favorite. They wrote a whole extra scene in there where they deep dived into why Scrooge is so money conscious and so obsessed with ensuring financial health. But yeah, just a really incredible story. That of course the Muppet version came out in 1992. My understanding is that might be the closest adaptation to the book. A lot of people try very hard to stay close to the book. A lot of people are just getting the little like flavors and elements of it in there.
Mhm.
But Muppet Christmas Carol to this date is one of the most true to the book versions. Of course, thrown with some Muppets thrown in and their amazing
Yeah.
music
Just
and
other than the fact that half the cast are
what makes it
puppets,
so
it's
fun.
fine. It's
Yeah,
absolutely fine. Right.
it's fine.
It's the
Everything's
most
fine.
accurate. We
Yeah.
we love that dichotomy in our world, and that is why the Muppets are exactly who we need in our lives. But also, I think it's interesting how you say that sometimes every other year, the reality of Christmas, especially traditions, but then also theater, and so the development of going from theater as our norm for storytelling that's live performance to film I mean, the Nutcracker happens every year. I know families who go to it every single year live and see it on stage. And so the reality that it's from that angle, it's not weird for Christmas Carol to have been done so often throughout the years, but also just that reality of with theater, we redo the same stories repeatedly with a different cast, a different director, a different angle that they're looking at it, a different time period or setting to switch it up. So all of the things that you discussed, that's literally theater, that's storytelling, it's how we keep things relevant. But I mean, I think as you were saying, the reality that we didn't really need to keep this one relevant. Charles Dickens, in the coolest and most badass of ways, wrote a ghost story for Christmas. Let's not forget that part, right? Like he was almost going Burton level in his own time of going, I'm not giving you guys just some frilly Christmas story. I'm giving you a freaking ghost story for Christmas, and you're welcome. And then it became one of the most loved and remade and persevering stories that we've had. And I had to read it in high school. I don't know if you did, but the
No, I
fact that
actually didn't. I'm surprised that I didn't.
yeah, I actually, which would, but that's the amazing part. But also just learning about Dickens as an author and how he functioned and why he's so verbose at times, like Great Expectations. But then, flip side, we've got Christmas Carol, which is nice and short and consumable. But so that's the great part is that while it gets redone, at the same time, we're sticking to literature being one of our main foundational art forms, and we're still reflecting back on things that were made centuries ago. So, um, cool. So that being said, so then the spirits, right? So the idea that Charles Dickens, with Christmas Carol, established a concept of past, present, and future in order to make the main character gain perspective, right? Which the one thing I am going to say between Scrooged and Muppet Christmas Carol, I think they do a great job in going to the past to establish how the path had led them to where the present is today. And I'm going to let you speak on that. I know, by the way, the Mickey or Disney Christmas Carol, the fact that it's Scrooge McDuck is still one of my absolute favorite concepts ever, like to this day. So just making sure that we throw in a little bit of love on that one because it's Scrooge McDuck, guys. Like we were watching DuckTales and then this man was Scrooge and it was perfect and the world aligned. Anyhow, so but yes.
I felt the same exactly about Scrooge McDuck. And I also felt the same way about Scrooge McDuck as I did about Fozzie Bear being Fozzie Wig, and how
Yes,
not only was his name perfect for that character, but his Muppet personality was just
yes,
beyond perfect. I mean,
yeah.
it was like, okay, we've been making Muppet films. At that point, they had been making films for just over a decade. I think the first Muppet film was 78, I think. And
Mhm.
this is 92. So we're not even at like 1.5 decades full. Um, and in that short little window of time, and of course, also the world had gone through the horrific tragedy that is still a tragedy that we had lost Jim Henson. And this was the
Yeah.
first film that his family and the company produced after his passing. Which, side note, if you are ever needing a good cry, go onto YouTube and look up some of the performances that his family and friends did during his memorial. Oh my gosh, if you ever just need to have an answer to the question, is there still good in the world? And do people put good in the world? Go watch that and you'll know we're gonna be okay. We can just
I
embody some Jim Henson in our life. But how freaking perfect the cast just lined up for each character
yes.
to have the Cratchits be the Cratchits. And of course, I just lose it at Piggy as Mrs. Cratchit every year and her whole and badly dressed little piggy twin daughters are more offended by that
Yes.
by anything else. I don't think as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old girl I identify with anything more in a film. Oh my gosh, that's
Nobody
the
knew that we
most
needed,
offensive thing that Scrooge has done was be badly dressed.
right. Knew that we needed like mean girl piggies because that's the
Yeah,
cutest thing we've ever seen. But to be fair, she's also pouty and sassy, but like for good measure. And we're like, get it, girl. You tell him he
right.
doesn't have fashion. We're here for it.
And if they weren't perfect for it, they made it work. Like Sam as his professor as a young child, and he says
Yes.
the American way, and Gonzo as Charles Dickens has to whisper in his ears, and he goes, "It's the British way." So
Which is probably the only time we're ever going to get Sam Eagle to acknowledge any country at all beyond America is that spot right there. So proud of
yeah,
him.
I'm literally crying. I'm laughing so hard. But yeah, no, if the Muppet wasn't 100% perfect for it, man, they still were perfect in the way they made it work. So, oh my gosh, so brilliant. Um, now that I'm laughing so hard, I'm crying. I forgot what we're going to talk about next.
We were going for past for so the Ghost of Christmas Past, which to be honest, not my favorite of ghosts, but we can have that conversation as we go through this. Who's your favorite ghost? Because past is okay, but not my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, it one of the reasons why this continues to be retold and retold is like you said, just that universal experience. No matter who you are, no matter what your walk of life, no matter where you've been, we all live this life in a forward motion through time. We all have a past. We all are living in the present and we all have a future. Obviously, depending on who you are, you may have a longer or shorter past and or a longer or shorter future. But we all are living that. That's a very universal experience we are all having. So we can connect to reflecting on things that have been, being honest about what's going on in the present, and trying to think about, what type of future do we want to have. I think they did such a great job with all of those puppets, so that the visual of the puppet, the Muppet, went with each of those, not just the character and who they are in the book, but also what that feels like for us as we go through that in time. The
But
Muppet.
also just the fun theatricality of how do we make Muppets ghosts? And how I love that that was one of the technical tackles, like with the Marleys, it's not just one Marley, it's two Marleys right now, to make it fit. Because as you said, making sure the Muppets are kind of filling the role and the right vibe. But so that reality with the Marleys, and because I think it's similar with the past, she's very effervescent and light, and she's very flowy. And so, how that was able to happen, just from a technical aspect as theater nerds, is also really fun to consider that somebody was given the assignment of make me a Muppet ghost and going, okay, cool. They have to be transparent? Okay, all right. Okay, we'll work on that one. You know what I mean? And so the reality of what kind of behind the stage things had to occur to make that would be awesome.
And it was a character that in the book, the way that Dickens describes them, to be able to read that and have an image form in your mind, how do you make that manifested in real life? And because we're talking about the past, oftentimes the past is portrayed as someone young. And so that was the perfect imagery. And they went with a Muppet that almost had like a porcelain doll kind of effect. And one of those, like you're talking about the behind the scenes, they wanted to make sure that the fabric could move in a very specific way. Like you were saying, had to be very ethereal, very transparent. And so they got, the Muppets with the guy controlling the Muppets into a pool, and the fabric just would not do what they wanted it to do. And so they actually wound up having to get into this big old thing of oil. All I can ever think when I see the scenes with past is the amount of showers that the people who controlled her Muppet must have had to take, the amount of soap it had to have taken,
Right?
the oil off of their own bodies at the end of, I'm sure, very long production days.
Like one of those Dawn commercials almost.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a Dawn commercial.
Custard oil.
There should be a Dawn commercial. The ducks are very cute, but let's do one with the folks from the Muppet
Muppet.
Workshop, because that's the real Dawn commercial I want to see.
Right?
But yeah, so, and she did a great job of kind of, and even her voice, they got one that where you really feel like you are being transported in time with Scrooge, with all of the amazing special effects and practical effects that they put into that ghost. And
And
I
I
think that is so important, because you're talking about a guy that, if you go back to when his party was with Fezziwig, and you think that maybe he was about a 20-year-old young man at that point, and then you go to 1843, you're looking at a guy that's probably in his mid 50s. So if you have a guy that's in his mid 50s, he's been living 3 or 4 decades being a very specific kind of person. To ask a human to change all of their behaviors and all of the traits that they've developed into over that course of time in one night, that's not realistic. And I think anyone in the mental health field would agree that that's just not something you're ever going to see a human do, is completely change their behavior in one night. So I think that's the other thing that's so important about the past Muppet and the past scenes, is that we have to believe that what she shows him, what he experiences, what he honestly is self-reflecting on, is enough to get him to change. And obviously he has 2 more ghosts to go after that, but it has to be enough to really rock him to his core. And in the non-theatrical version, if you go onto Disney Plus and you watch in the extras version, there is one extra scene when he's re-witnessing Belle breaking up with him. I feel like that's the moment you're seeing it when he's sad, seeing he's a little kid, and you're seeing it, um, you know, through falling in love with Belle again, but you really see it in that song and the way that he weeps as he sings. That's probably the first moment he's really been honest with himself of a mistake that he made at such crucial crossroads.
And
But
I think that that is actually the beauty, what you were saying of like, this is, it has to be enough. The device in the storytelling has to be enough to make a character realize what is going on and have that perspective. And so ultimately you're absolutely right, because what Dickens really was doing was showing him, here's what you valued then, here's how it's played your life out, where do you want to go moving forward? Which is so funny because, speaking of, there's this device that I love to use, which is actually a visual handout online at therapistaid.com, but it's a values worksheet. And so it has just maybe 3 lines per box. But the one box is, what does society value? What do people who are important to me value? What do my parents value? Right? And so maybe like, what does my mom value? What does my dad value? And then on the bottom, it's, what do I value now? What do I want to value? And I feel like that's literally the whole entire picture of what the past, present, and future are about. Is the past is, what were you told to value? What were you told was important? Because somewhere it was ingrained in him that finances were the important part. You will have comfort, you will have all these things if you have finances. To the point where he wasn't willing to compromise his career for love, right? But that's not what Fozziwig role modeled for him. That's not what was necessarily being taught. But because of the abandonment in the beginning and that lack of unconditional love, support, secure attachment, family support network, etc., it was never important to him to have that connection. And so then I feel like our present, which we can get into in a second, but the idea of, I feel like the ghost of present is really showing him how he affects other people, how that man who started in the past got to today. Because you're right, we don't go through much of the past, like getting to who he is today beyond the breakup. The breakup's a huge sign of like, you made this choice of career over any community connection, anything. And then how are you affecting those around you is really what present becomes. And then the future becomes the, who do you want to be? Because right now, the course you're on, this is where you're going, right? And so the ghost of future really poses that question of, who do you want to be? And that's the devices that are truly like at the root of what Dickens was using and creating this now literature standard of a storytelling model, right? But so bringing it back to present, who, spoiler alert, is my favorite ghost out of all of literally every single production, probably ever, even Scrooged, my favorite ghost is present. Absolutely always. I love the big jolly guy in Muppet and Mickey. But like I said, absolutely love the little pixie, spicy, feisty version in Scrooged because her opposite Bill Murray is one of the best cinematic concepts. Those two are like improv geniuses together. Absolutely adore it. But yes, so present.
Oh my goodness. Well, present is amazing because again, you're in this stage where special effects are on the rise in film. So there's a nice blend of both special and practical effects going on for him. So he's again described in the book. We get to see that he's just literally filling the room. His food, his energy, his voice, everything is filling the room. And it's a good tonal shift because we just came out of revisiting this breakup. And I feel like he does the same thing to all of us on the other side of the screen that he does to Scrooge, where he just, you can't help but just smile and feel jovial right along with him. And he is so important because he, like you said, he shows that perspective of, let me show you a different way to look at the world you are currently living in that you just don't even look at. To me, it's always been so surprising that he is surprised by the fact that he's the butt of that game, that he is the answer to the yes or no game. He's just so surprised that, all of the descriptions that are given of him, once it's revealed as him at the end, he just seems so shocked and so hurt. And that has always surprised me because I've always thought, who do you think that you are to these people? Like, who do you think you're projecting to the people in your world, in your community? Do you really think that they see you as anything other than that? And of course, Future comes in and really drives that home later, as
Yes,
well as Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy, the founder of the feast, indeed. She's so indignant that
yes,
her husband is being so gracious and so kind and acknowledging that he is the employer. He is the one that has technically paid for that through Bob's work. And Miss Piggy cannot even stand the idea of acknowledging that. But yeah, I've always been surprised by his response because it always makes
mhm,
me think, how do you think you're portraying yourself? How do you think you're putting yourself out in the world? And that's, I think, another reason why this story is so universal is that we all need to be accountable for our actions. We all need to have honest self-reflection, but as a species, we're not always very good at that. So
right. And I love how he gives Scrooge the opportunity to be present, but not present, and see this reality, because that is the glory of the ghosts. The ghosts allow him to be present, but not present, and gain the perspective and kind of understand and see this. And I'm going to be that child who is unfortunately adding into the colloquial slang and perspective of autism. But that idea of Scrooge is very black and white. He's very black and white. And so the idea that he wouldn't really understand why people are so insulted and offended by his behavior, because to him, it's just like the whole argument with Bob in the beginning of lousy excuse to pick a man's pocket every December 25th. You know what I mean? In his brain, which is so black and white, this is how it is, finances, numbers, accounting, concrete information, that's a gray. That is a gray zone. That does not compute. I don't like it. Sorry, not sorry. I don't understand why I have to do this, which is ironically so very spectrum-esque. Like that is where we where we end up with a lot of spectrum symptoms is the idea that they don't always understand how they're affecting others, but then again, at the same time, upset and like hurt that he is considered such an atrocity amongst all of these individuals. Like that he is somehow the villain or bad guy, and he's just like, I mean, I might not like people and I might like money better, but he didn't genuinely think he was a bad guy.
And I say, Zangief, you are bad guy. But this does not mean you're bad guy.
And that's what's so interesting about that perspective that we gain. And you're right, Miss Piggy says it best.
The founder of the feast, indeed.
Yes. Yes.
I cooked all day, and you're giving credit to that guy that has kept us in poverty. Are you kidding me, husband? And he's like, yeah. The children. And she's like, oh, the children are going to hear about this.
Right. Yeah.
In her very Miss Piggy way.
The idea that we had the ghost of past, very gentle, but kind of neutral, right? Because she's going back and she's showing him things that maybe he's not proud of, or maybe he hid that stuff, repressed it because he didn't want to think about it. And then we get present, and it's adorable. I love Michael Caine for this. The reality of when he meets him, he's dreading these ghosts because it has not been the most pleasant experience. And then, but by the end of the time that the ghost of present is leaving him, he's sad. He's genuinely sad. He is losing this person that he just spent this time with. And it shows that Scrooge is capable of a connection. Scrooge is capable of empathy. He's capable of making that kind of a connection with a person or an entity. He's just literally been repressing it and avoiding it this whole entire time, which is part of that lesson he's learning, that by prioritizing money, prioritizing the bottom line, and that he isn't the most extroverted of people, that he has pretty much been creating this whole other dynamic. And so the ghost of present sits in the middle, almost to give us that perspective, to give us that here's past that he was avoiding that hurts. Here's now, but the ghost gives us that hope that, okay, Scrooge isn't a complete loss. Like, Scrooge had fun. Scrooge cared. He was like, what do you mean you're dying? Because I also love that visual. I love, love, love. And that's maybe why he's one of my favorites. But the fact that he ages in just that short period of time that we have with Ghost of Present, he ages. And then he's dying, and Scrooge is genuinely concerned about the fact that he's dying and that he can't do anything to change it. And that gives us this realistic perspective that maybe there's still some of the old Scrooge that had a girlfriend and was fun still is in there.
It's what you just said. It's the perfect visual to show how fleeting the present is, and that we need to be more mindful and more present in the present. It also helps to prepare us emotionally for the ginormous tonal shift, because Marley and Marley, we get that little moment. There's, I think, like 47 seconds where you're getting a little scared and nervous with him. And then Jacob and Robert come up over the banister, and immediately you're like, oh, okay, I'm not scared. And even though there's a little anxiety and trepidation with past, especially when he goes to fly, you're not really that scared. And of course, you're not scared at all with present. But when we are with future, that's when we really feel it. Even Gonzo and Rizzo are like, bye, kids. We're out. We'll get back to you after this section right here. We're not the guy who wrote this, I'm still not going to hang out for this. Mm-hmm. And honestly, in this film, that ghost might be my favorite. He's done so well. My entire life, I've wanted to reach for that screen and touch that fabric and see what it is that they use. It feels like a crinkled China silk that they did some kind of like paint technique on top of, but I will never know. And it makes me so sad. It also, another fun filmmaking detail of that transition, the effect, the very practical effect to have that wall of fog overtake him, that he turns and he's very surprised and it just overtakes him and transitions him from the present into the future. The amount of effort that it took the filmmakers to prep that was so massive, so ginormous. They're like, all right, guys, we literally can't reset this and do it again. So we got to get this right. We got one take to do this. So let's do it right. So, and they did. I mean, it's such a classic moment. It's just a few seconds, but it's very emotionally impactful, and it gives you the right visual to transform into that next time period. And then, like we said before, those are the scenes where he just even more driven home of the legacy that he has left in his community.
Yes.
The shock that he feels from that. I think one of the most powerful lines we get is from one of the, I think it's the little Muppet cockroach or spider, whatever she is. And Joe says, I'm not going to pay you extra for the warmth. Oh my gosh, you grabbed these so fast. They're still warm, these blankets. And she says, well, you should pay me extra for the warmth. It's the only warmth he ever had. I think that's the most powerful line we get from all of those little moments. I mean, it's sad to see the gentleman heckling and hoping that lunch is provided at his funeral, and to see his physical belongings being pawned off so quickly. But that line of it's the only warmth you ever have, I feel like that is the most powerful moment of that whole section, because that really tells him, wow, you have left a terrible legacy on your community.
And I want to just note, because I think it's very amazing how they tied in the fact that that scene in the future, which is supposed to be dark, it's very foreboding, it's kind of creepy, that they chose creatures they chose for that moment, for that scene. Out of all the Muppet universe, out of all the creatures, that they specifically chose these creatures, and they're having this conversation and they're looking down on Scrooge. And so that's even bigger. The idea that these creatures that most of us would be like ugh about, or find creepy, find a little standoffish, right, or not even respect their existence, are talking down about him, is the exact imagery and parallel of the irony of what he does, how he treated the it's Beaker and Honeydew, right? In the beginning, and they're coming around for donations, like how he treats those people, and yet he's being talked about in a similar manner by these people who literally steal from homes, it seems, and just the irony of how those social dynamics exist. And you're absolutely right. So the concept of his legacy, how people are remembering him, talking about him as soon as he's gone, the only warmth he ever had, such great visuals and metaphors for that reality. But yes, I just wanted to, while you were touching on that, the idea of those creatures out of the whole entire Muppet verse, that's who they chose for that scene, just seems exceptionally intentional.
I love that. I agree. I feel like that imagery is just so powerful. And just to see that joy and the way that he changes, I think it's got such a great ending. Of course, in the Muppet version, the song is so good. We've seen the full version that has that very famous actress from West End that they brought in so she could sing that song, just to have it cut from the theatrical release, but it still exists. You can see it today, and you're basically getting the inverse of that song at the end. She sings "When Love Is Gone," and then Scrooge gets to sing "When Love Is Found." So it's just a perfect little sandwich of his experiences, where he goes from what he chose, what he's remembering, what he experienced, into what he can make his future be. Like you were talking about, what do you want your values to be? What do you want your life to be? So I think it's the perfect ending.
I was just going to say that I love the fact that Scrooged adds the element of the love interest character in the present day, right? And then because in the future, with the ghost of future, We see her reaction to his death. We see where she has gone. And I think that's very, very interesting and fun. And it's something that Muppets, we kind of miss that. We don't know where she went. We don't know where that road ended. But because in Scrooged, we see her and she's no to the poor orphan children, and she's above them, and she has taken on that money over people belief and trait and quality. And but we miss that in the Muppet one. And so but I like that. I like that he is kind of horrified that he rubbed off on her, because she was the one that cared. She was the one that literally was like in human services, social work, social services, helping people, and that he was the antithesis. And that's another reason I love Scrooge, though, is just that pair, and they're super cute together, but just that fact of she's the antithesis to Scrooged, and I think is why Scrooged is one of my favorite. Is it not just told the story, it also held up a reflection of this is your opposite, your literal opposite, and she was meant to balance you out, but instead you got threatened and you ran away.
Well, thank you so much for joining us yet again. We just love being able to geek out about movies with each other and with you. And we're so grateful to be able to have this focus on the Christmas season as we wrap up 2025. And we hope you guys have a wonderful new year as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of it. I love getting to have this time and these insights with my BFF. And as always, share your insights and input in comments. Let us know what you think. Give us your favorite movies. And let's hear what everyone's favorite holiday tradition movies are that really kind of make the holiday season for them. Thanks, guys.